I can't think of a better way to greet your family and guests at the door when they come to your home on a holiday and have them walk in and it smells like fresh bread baking in the oven. If you're going to bake bread that includes yeast, make sure you check your expiration date. That's one of the reasons why you'll go ahead and see if the yeast blooms before you start your recipe. And how we do that is we add it to warm water. This is just a little warmer than body temperature. So we're going to put in a separate bowl 3 tablespoons of water. And 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. This would be what you would get in one of those envelope packages if you bought it and you didn't buy it by the jar. Let's see here. We're going to stir that up a little bit. And we're going to let that go ahead and sit for a few moments, and it will change from looking like little granules to a really foamy bloom. I'm confident that my yeast is active because I've used it, like I said, a couple times this week. We have 1 cup of warm whole milk. I've never bought fat-free milk. I don't know if the recipe would work or not, but if you're going to eat dinner rolls with milk and butter and jam and jelly and everything else, this isn't the point where I want to try and save calories. And I'm a full-fat person on everything that I cook. We have 5 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the microwave on a very low temperature for just about a minute so it can start melting. Okay. I have 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, a teaspoon of salt, and 1 fresh egg. This is a room temperature egg. Once you see that it's starting to bubble, then you know you have some activity. That's what gives the bread a nice open airy crumb. It's a nice moist dough and you have an active yeast. So that's how it works. When I've used an ingredient in the recipe, anytime I'm baking, I like to try and keep track of what I've put in and what I haven't. Sometimes on the farm I'll get easily distracted. We're right in the height of lambing season right now, so if I had to go outside and didn't get back in right away, I might forget what I put in the recipe so far. And when I know it's on this back table, it's incorporated. So we'll measure our flour. I do use a scale and I measure in grams. I bake a lot of sourdough and it's just out of habit that I've converted all of my recipes with flour to a weight by grams. This is a bread flour and I use 265 grams of bread flour in this recipe. Good. And 190 grams of all-purpose. Take that back down to 0. Part of the tweaking of this recipe for me over the years was to create a really moist dough, which makes a really nice open roll. So we've got all of our wet ingredients and our flour. And I have my mixing bowl. You can do this by hand. Through the years, I've adapted everything to using a stand mixer, and I've used KitchenAid, and I use my Anchor Shroom. They both work great. So we're going to stir this up, and I'm going to pour all the liquid ingredients in the bottom of the bowl. I prefer doing it this way when the beater's going around, or in this case with the Anchor Shroom, the bowl is spinning. You don't have those pockets of dry flour at the bottom of the bowl when you get done with your mix. Nothing, just pour it all right in there. And this is just about the consistency I'm looking for. I'm going to cover up the dough. We're going to let it rise for probably about an hour, hour and a half, depending on the temperature in the house. It's a beautiful yellow color. Okay, I have my dough, which is doubled in size, all-purpose flour, a large baking sheet, my scale, a dough knife, parchment paper. I set the oven temperature to 375 degrees, and by the time our rolls have risen, the oven will be at temperature. So we'll take a piece of parchment, put that in the bottom of our pan. I'm going to take just a light dusting of all-purpose flour and put it on my board surface, and then I move the extra to the side. My hands have a little bit of flour on them so the dough won't stick. My shoes off here. So it's a really soft dough. It feels lovely. Kind of just put it in a little bit of a tube shape. And I'm going to start. For me personally, I like the rolls right around 45 grams. It's the perfect little size. It's almost like a little bit of a slider roll. It's good with butter and jam and jelly, or to make little miniature sandwiches out of it. At 45 grams, I know I can get 20 rolls out of this recipe, which is nice because then I can kind of calculate how many I need for the amount of people coming to dinner. You can put your finger just between the rolls. That's how close I have them. I'm going to show you how I shape these. 45 gram. Okay. So I take the roll and I stretch it out fairly thin, and then I fold all the edges in. My oven's already getting warm. And then I just slowly twist the bottom, kind of knit it together. The top's nice and smooth. If the dough wants to stick to you, you can just lightly put some flour on your hands. I find this very therapeutic. Push it in, pull your sides in. It's almost like if you were making a dumpling of sorts. I've got the wood stove cranking in here pretty good today, so it's not going to take long for these rolls to rise the second time. If it's the first time you're making the rolls, I wouldn't worry about having them coming out of the oven the minute people are walking in. But from start to finish, I would guess it's 15 minutes to prep the roll, an hour and 15 minutes for a rise. If it's your first time, I might add a little bit of extra time as far as shaping, but it doesn't take me long, maybe 5 minutes. Preheat your oven. In about 45 minutes, your rolls are going to be ready to go. And they'll stay warm for a good while if you keep them covered with a tea towel. But do a trial run. Don't wait till the day of your meal to experiment with making rolls for the first time. I do have these spaced out pretty evenly on the pan, and that will give me a good idea of when they're risen to the right consistency. Our rolls have risen not all of the way. Like I said, the second part of the rise will actually be in the oven. There's still a little space in between. They'll fill in really nice when you put them in the oven. I've made these rolls many times and I know exactly how long it takes to bake them in my oven at 375. You're going to find that your oven temperature runs a little bit different. I'm going to put them in the oven and we're going to let them go for the first 9 minutes. And at that point, I'm going to take them out and brush them with butter and then rotate the pan. Let me get my butter. I'm going to melt this real quick in the microwave. All right, we're halfway through the bake time. I have 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Pull out the rolls. You want to do this really lightly. We want to make sure we don't collapse the roll by brushing on it. And I'm pretty generous with this. I use a salted butter. I think it adds a lot of flavor to the top of the roll. I don't have the convection oven on. This is just a regular oven. The fan does blow, but the exhaust fan's blowing, but the inside fan is not. That leaves just enough butter for me to dip my rolls in. When I'm done, I rotate these and I put them back in, and I'm going to let these bake just about another 7 to 8 minutes. Okay, let's see what you got here. Oh boy, they look good. Pretty rolls. I like to just take and lift up the parchment paper and remove the pan as quickly as possible. Don't burn yourself. It's not that big of a deal, but I want them to cool nicely and not sweat on the bottom. I have the rolls off of the baking pan and I've removed the parchment paper from underneath. And I would let them sit like this for a little while. If your guests aren't here yet, and then we're going to transfer them to a bowl lined with a tea towel. And that will keep them warm until people come, and I'm going to cover that with another tea towel. So I'm going to open up one of these rolls. I've saved my little bit of melted butter. It really is the perfect yeast roll. You do want to make sure that you get a nice brown color to these. I don't want to eat them doughy. It's so, so good. I really encourage you to try this. Happy baking. My dog is just moaning and groaning.